I know there are people here in this church that are really crafty. Okay, they even make their own Christmas cards. How many make your own Christmas cards? Don't do that to me. Okay, I know you make your own Christmas cards. I know there's people that do that. But yes, thank you. Here's the deal. We need a craft person for Wednesday night Adventure Kids. And all the teaching positions are filled. All right, we just need 2 people to say, yes, I can help with crafts and help the kids. And the crafts are all pre-arranged, so you don't have to come up with ideas or anything unless you want to. But if you're interested in that, did you put your hand up? You didn't have to volunteer this morning like that. And give her a hand, people. Oh. That is really neat. Okay, Sue, thank you. Thank you for doing that. Okay, who wants to help Sue? I want to roll. Sunday school, next year, fall. How many teachers? It was working so good, I just said. Don't forget Christmas program next week. Kids program, you don't want to miss it. Great program. Joe Beal and company always put something fun together. So next week, the Christmas program. Then I want to welcome Devin. Stand up, Devin. He's our new worship leader. And if you want to come for service, you would have met Lexi. Lexi is not here this morning, but she was here for service. Any other announcements that I might fail to make? The meeting afterwards. Yes, we have congregational meeting afterwards. Good job, Courtney. And in fact, there is a meal right behind me in the fellowship hall. And even if you're not staying for the congregational meeting, you can eat with us, okay? It's just a time of fellowship and enjoy our company together. So plan to do that. If you have plans at home, let it go, okay? That roast in the oven will be like beef jerky, but that's okay. All right, let's stand and greet each other in the name of Christ the Lord.
All right, there it is. Good morning, everybody. At this time, you all may be seated as we do the Advent candle reading.
Isaiah writes, "A shoot will come from the stump of Jesse, from his roots a branch will bear fruit. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and of understanding, the Spirit of counsel and of might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. And he will delight in the fear of the Lord. He will not judge by what he sees with his eyes, or decide by what he hears with his ears. But the righteousness will he will judge the needy. With justice he will give decisions for the poor of the earth. He will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth. With the breath of his lips he will slay the wicked. Righteousness will be his belt, and faithfulness the sash around his waist. The wolf will live with the lamb. The leopard will lie down with the goat. The calf and the lion and the yearling together. The little child will lead them. The cow will feed with the bear. Their young will lie down together. And the lion will eat straw like the youngs. The infant will play near the cobra's den, and the young child will put his hand into the viper's nest. They will neither harm nor destroy on all my holy mountain, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. In that day the root of Jesse will stand as a banner for the peoples. The nations will rally to him, and his resting place will be glorious."
Advent points us all to that day, 2,000 years ago, when the root of Jesse stood as a banner for those people. The nations will rally to him, and his resting place will be glorious. When the glory of the Lord shines, there is peace. Peace that breaks all conflict. Even when it seems like it lasts only moments, yet it is the moments that, in spite of the conflict, we give glory and honor and praise. A peace that reigns.
We light these candles to say, in the midst of fear, we will hope. In the midst of conflict, there is peace.
Would you pray with me? Father, this Advent we ask that you would use us to bring peace to the continent, peace to our world, peace to our nation, peace to our state, peace to our city, peace to our families, peace within each of us. As we light these candles, help us to remember that 2,000 years ago, a child was born, and life as we know it was changed. Everything was changed. God of promise, God of hope, God of peace, into our darkness come. Amen.
Amen. I invite you all to remain seated. Let's sing out. attention to the choir, I hear that they have a pretty wonderful voice.
Will you pray with me? Gracious and giving God, we once again prepare for the birth of your chosen Son. Through the voices of prophets and preachers, you have been heard in the driest deserts and the steepest valleys. Unfurl our hearts and open our minds so that we may hear your salvation story anew. Giving this money is a worshipful gesture of our unending alleluias to you. We dedicate this offering to your kingdom work. Amen.
You all remember this? How many remember that? Last year, right? And what came out of that old stump? A shoe. We've been using that. I never took it back home. We burned wood out of the fire. Janet and I kind of lived like hicks. And I never took it back. And it's just been out here used as a doorstop out this west door. And I just said to Ken, I said, now it looks totally dead and gone. And that verse just gets me every time. It says, and a shoot sprang forth out of the stump of Jesse. And that story of Christmas, it's kind of like those people that get caught up in Revelation sometimes and tries to predict and tries to figure it out. And I really have my doubts, because when Jesus came the first time, nobody would say that a stump is going to produce anything. And God just kind of defies logic, defies everything, and puts this thing together. And it's so beautiful, so wonderful. And so there's the old stump. It reminds me of that. Let's look to the Lord in prayer. Lord God, what a beautiful season. It has both simplicity and complexity all intertwined. It's so simple, your grace and your redemption, that all we need to do is just simply acknowledge you. Yet at the same time, the complexity of it we'll never fully understand or comprehend. But Lord God, you have offered us your grace, your mercy. And so this morning, we come before you, and we just say thank you. Thanks for the purpose that we have in life, and the freedom we have, and the hope we have through Christ our Lord. Thank you for Jesus. Thank you for the Bethlehem seed. Thank you, Heavenly Father, that we can come just as the wise men did, and honor him and worship him. And Lord God, may we gain from this experience of worship this morning in such a way that we go out into our community this week changed, transformed, different, because we've been in your very presence. Direct us the remainder of this time, be with Ken as he shares the message that you've laid on his heart. And may Jesus Christ be all in him all. Amen.
Thank you, Stephen. And the choir got me in first service when they switched to fall on your knees and oh holy night. Like I was standing back there and was like, ooh, got me. And then I moved over here and I knew it was coming and it still got me. Like, well done, y'all. It's nice to see a big, massive group of people singing out like that. If you are visiting with us, first, thank you for coming. Second, feel free to stay afterwards and eat some food with us. You don't have to come to the congregational meal, but you can still eat food. And if you're usually here and you forgot to bring something, you can still come and eat on us anyway. That's totally cool. You don't have to bring something to participate. So yeah, thank you for coming. And what we're doing now is we're in the season called Advent. Advent is the time of anticipation, preparation. I forgot kids can go to children worship. Tim even told me in the back, he's like, don't forget kids in children worship. Children worship can head off that way if they would like to. And the season of Advent is about expectation and what's coming and a little something that builds up towards Christmas. And we do the Advent wreath. And normally you would hear passages like the Isaiah stories, and you would hear passages from Luke and Matthew and the Magi and the shepherds and Mary and Elizabeth with her baby and all that. Instead, we took a different view this year on Advent. So normally you see like the close-up view, like if you get the microscope out. My gramps had glaucoma towards the later end, and I bought him these big microscope style, like big magnifying glass that had like LED lights on it, so like he could read his Bible and stuff. I'm talking they're like this big. You can get them on Amazon, super cheap. And so when you see the Christmas story, it's like you have one of those magnifying glasses. And what we're doing is saying, let's take the magnifying glass away, step back, and look at it from a cosmic scale. Let's look at it from the whole world and not just a manger in Bethlehem with the people surrounding Jerusalem and the story told there. But what does that mean on the grand scale and the grand scheme? And so we are in an apocalyptic Christmas, and the reason for that is only because we're looking in the book of Revelation. And for some of you, that means scary, creepy, crazy things going on. And for some of us, we go, I don't know what half of that stuff means, so I'm just doing my best to figure it out along the way with y'all. And that just means a lot of reading and a lot of thinking, and sometimes going, I don't know. And that's okay, because it wasn't written to you. It was written to people 1900 and some odd years ago, right at the end of the 90s AD, literally from 0 to 30 something Jesus dies. By 90, John starts writing this book that we call Revelation. The original Greek is called Apocalypse, and all that means is to unveil. So we get this connotation of scary end of the world stuff, or Denzel Washington walking around with a sword and glasses on, if you watch those kind of weird apocalyptic movies, or things that seem kind of crazy. And the reality is the book of Revelation is really meant more like, this was here, I didn't even see this last service. It's like a present, right? Like under your tree. And all apocalypse means is to take the lid off and go, oh, that's what's in there. This is empty. There's nothing in there. Sorry, baby Jesus, you didn't get anything cool this Christmas. But literally, when we approach the book of Revelation, it means to just tear the paper off and see what's inside. It's not meant to be creepy or scary, and some of that gets a little fuzzy because we haven't spent the majority of our life reading through the prophets of the Old Testament where we go, oh, that's why he says that. So this week, we're going to do some of that. I am going to pray. After I pray, I'm going to tell you a story that's not a story. I'm going to tell you snapshots, like puzzle pieces, that we have to put together in the end. It's kind of like when you watch a movie and you see like the first like 45 seconds of the movie is where your wife is always trying to talk to you and everything is happening and you go, I think I need to know all that stuff right now. And then it goes to the next scene and you're like, wait a minute, I don't understand what just happened. And then you get to the end and you go, oh, that puzzle piece fits with this puzzle piece and that puzzle piece goes with this. And then you step back and you see the whole big picture and it makes a little more sense. So I'm building a little bit of anticipation, Adventist, into the sermon of, I'll tell you some puzzle pieces, some snapshots, and then we'll put them all together like a puzzle. My wife has been doing puzzles at our house, like literally the card table is out, and right now it's a weird dog, and before that was one that she gave up on because it had too many straight lines in the middle. I don't do puzzles, they're frustrating to me, so I'm just telling you puzzles. Not that any of you need to know that, I'm rambling, I'm gonna pray. God, I pray that you would take away the rambles. I pray that you would take away the things that keep us from hearing you. The things that we shove in our ears, not physically, but maybe more practically when it comes to life stuff. When we let the cold get to us, when we let the food right after the service get to us, when we let all of those things in this life get to us, so that we can't hear you, I pray that you would take them away. That you would help us to listen, that you would help us to begin to sift through those places in our life that we don't understand. And here in an old story, an old letter written to the early church during a time of struggle, I pray that you would give us the lens to see and ears to hear, to begin to understand that truly this day you would be our teacher, that the word spoken would be yours, that the voice heard would be yours, that like that fateful day in the garden you took dirt from the ground and you said, live, and Adam did. I pray this day that you would speak that same life and that we would live. In Jesus' name, amen. So the first snapshot that you get to see is how many of y'all had a Gateway computer? Mid-90s Gateway. They were everywhere. I even worked for Gateway Computers for a while. Hi, this is Solomon, Gateway Sales. How may I help you? What's your name? Thank you. I sold a lot of computers through Gateway. So there's a Gateway, and it's the old one. And then how many of y'all played the Snake game? Anybody play the Snake game? It was on telephones for a while, too, until they got so advanced that they're like, we can't make the snake go slow enough to help the pixels follow it. So literally it was the round, and you eat the apples, and you come around, and then you eventually don't eat yourself is the whole point of the game, that you get so big, and it's kind of like Pac-Man, but not really. So there's the Snake game on a Gateway computer. There's frost outside in the trees, like a couple of days ago where the fog kind of froze onto the trees, and it was like the beautiful white scene. You walk out and you're like, oh, that's nice. And the snow on the ground was more like the salt crystals that you throw out than soft, fluffy. So it crunches. Yeah, just like that. And then the next scene is an old, what probably was white and is a little more dingy, AT&T telephone that would have sat in like a business office with all the different buttons and everything, just laying to the side. An old yet reliable, a little bit rusty 410 shotgun. A large deep freeze, like the big kind, where you have to almost lift the door and put a board in it to keep the thing from falling down because it's so old. Let's see here. Oh, a 1986 Plymouth Caravelle. Anybody know that car? No? Dodge Reliant? No? Yeah, two of you were like, yeah. I did the same thing in first service. The New Yorker, Chrysler New Yorker. Yeah, that was the upscale version. And the Dodge and the Plymouth ones were like the economy class. But it was the ugliest little light blue car with 4 doors known to man during the time. Sitting there in the snow. And then the last thing you see is frosty windows. When there's too much humidity in your house and the window kind of freezes over and you can't quite see through and it's almost foggy but not quite. It's a layer of moisture and paint that sticks to your feet. Where when you step on it with your shoes, not like now where you step outside and it's wet and you hear the squeaking, this is more like like it sticks. Okay, there's your puzzle pieces. Revelation 9, here we're going to get to the crazy stuff. Grab your Bible, it's in front of you. It'll be on the screen, but sometimes it's easier just to have it there so you can read it. And I will tell you right off the bat, John did not write this to confuse people. The reason that we might get confused is we don't live in the 90s and early 100s AD. We live 1900 some years later. And so some of this stuff doesn't always make sense. And most of us didn't grow up Hebrew. We didn't grow up in the family of Jewish thought, and we didn't study the scriptures the way that he would have. So I'm going to jump in and read, and then we'll break things down for those of you that like a little history and like a little more of the nuts and bolts of what's going on. And then we'll come back around to our puzzle. Now, a great sign appeared in heaven. Let's just pause Jesus used parables. He told stories of things that happened in real life or could happen in real life to illustrate a point. Here, John is doing the same thing, but telling you, there is a sign in heaven. I see this, and I'm going to use it to explain something. A woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and the crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on its heads, and its tail swept away a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth so that it might devour her child the moment he was born. She gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter. And her child was snatched up to God and to his throne. Then the woman fled into the wilderness to a place prepared for her by God, where she might be taken care of for 1,260 days. Then a war broke out in heaven. And I'll say the then is, he saw one sign, and now this is a separate one. A war broke out in heaven, as in the place where God is. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough. And they lost their place in heaven. And the great dragon was hurled down, the serpent, the ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. Now what I'm going to do is unpack some of the beginning stuff. Steve talked about things last week, and then we got done, and he said to me, go back and touch on the beginning woman part, because I drawed the connections, and in one service he did a really good job, and the next service he did a really good job at the application part, and that was one of those weeks where you should have gone to both. I know it's the same service twice every week, but you should have came to both and you would have got a lot more. And so what I want to do is, if you have glasses, you just take them off like this. Most of you are like, I ain't going to do that, whatever. Okay. So you take them off, and then when you put them on, suddenly things are a little clearer, right? I'm going to help you have some glasses that John would have used in order to write this. So I'm going to go back, and we're going to look at Genesis chapter 37. It'll be on the screen. You can write it down if you want to. Genesis 37, and here we find some of the nuts and bolts and the pieces that helps John write what he sees in that day. This is the story of Joseph, the guy with the cool coat and the one that would eventually be sold as a slave into Egypt. He has these dreams. And here is the second dream that he has. Then I had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. Listen, he said, I had another dream, and this time the sun and the moon and the 11 stars were bowing down to me. When he told his father and as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, what is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you? Now in the story of Joseph, you know that does happen. He becomes one of the rulers in Egypt, a prefect that takes care of things, and they come later to say, there's a famine, we need food. And so they grovel before him asking for food. But what you have to see here is Joseph has a dream representing Israel. Remember, his dad is the one whose name is changed to Israel. And his dad is the one that completely interprets the dream for us. He says, so me and your mom, the sun and the moon, and the stars, your brothers, are going to bow before you. When you begin to see that, we'll put the pieces together a little bit further after a couple more passages. You begin to see, so what is John talking about when he talks about a woman in the sky clothed with the sun and the moon and the stars as a crown? You begin to see the nation of Israel as a whole and not just an individual woman. So first off, you have to begin with the lens that here is where John is coming from. as a Hebrew boy reading the scriptures, being told them. The majority of these stories are passed down from one person to another through mouth, because most people didn't have money to have books. So put that in that's like one lens. The other lens, we're going to look at Isaiah chapter 26, verse 17. It'll be up on the screen, but if you're flipping, feel free to flip. Now this is the context of Isaiah as a prophet during the time of exile of Israel. And so here he is speaking on God's behalf to the people and on the people's behalf to God as the intermediary, trying to find that way back. The whole point of any prophetic literature is to say, you missed the boat, come back. You turned away, turn around. This is what God desires. And so here we find at the beginning of Isaiah's long journey, he refers to Israel here. Now, as a pregnant woman about to give birth writhes and cries out in her pain, so were we in your presence, Lord. For we were with child, we writhed in labor, but we gave birth to wind. We have not brought salvation to the earth, and the people of the world have not come to life. Now, when you have the one lens of the moon and the stars and the dream that shows Israel, and the other of Isaiah saying, Israel is like the woman with a child in her womb, waiting to give birth, struggling through the pain, and in that day, during the exile, gave birth and nothing. When you begin to move a little further, and I'm going to read the first portion of Revelation again. The great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and with the moon under her feet, and the crown of 12 stars on her head. Here you should see John figuratively saying, the nation of Israel stands in the sky. Pregnant, waiting, just like Isaiah told earlier. Here we find she was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Here, when you begin to look at things not on a small scale, but on the cosmic scale, you see that John has taken the story of Mary and Jesus in the small town of Bethlehem and blown it up to a huge stage. But this isn't Mary. This is the nation longing for something more, waiting for something to happen, struggling through pain. And the reality is sometimes we struggle through pain, and that gives birth to hope. That literally what he's trying to do here is there are people in the first century church that are undergoing trials, tribulations, persecutions. Nero going crazy in the 60s. This is written in the 90s. They begin to see that the church is not okay place. It's not the place that people can live and be comfortable. It's the one where they literally go to the marketplace, and in order to buy food, they had to offer incense to whoever the emperor was. And if you didn't do that, you didn't get the food. So now what he's saying is you are living in a time of birth pains, longing for hope and expectation, and then something else happens. We know that the dragon comes. He tells us who it is. But to help us kind of grasp that scene, we're going to do the same thing with our glasses and figure out one lens and another to begin to see this a little clearer. We're going to go all the way back to Genesis 3. Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the other wild animals that the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God really say?" You know the story of the fruit and all of those things. Then we get to verse 14. So the Lord God said to the serpent, "Because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock and all animals. You will crawl on your belly, and you will eat dust all the days of your life." And here's the big part. "I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel." This is like when The Lord of the Rings came out, and Peter Jackson was like, "Man, those movies did good." Did anybody watch those movies? And then when The Hobbit came out, where you totally like, okay, I'll go see that, but this is totally your way of just like, well, that worked out good, let's do it again. But we need a different story, so we got to have the prequel story. What you find here in Genesis is the prequel story to before John ever gets to Revelation. He gives you the cosmic battle at the foundations of all the earth. You'll crawl on your belly. You'll struggle. The other part of this is, women, you will cry out in childbirth that it will not be easy or pleasant. There will be pain through it, but that pain brings hope, and your offspring and his will hate each other. And in the end, he will stomp you out. In the end, the serpent will lose, but it'll be a battle. On a cosmic scale, you have to read the beginning book shows you what's going to happen, and John begins to pick it up in chapter 12 of Revelation. I'm going to move forward a little bit to the prophet Jeremiah. Here we see the prophet Jeremiah talking about King Nebuchadnezzar, the one who is in Babylon, the one that literally comes and takes people away into captivity. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, has devoured us. He has thrown us into confusion, and he has made us an empty jar. Like a serpent, he has swallowed us and filled his stomach with our delicacies, and then has spewed us out. Here, what you should begin to see is how the prophets continually, and I didn't highlight all the different verses of how Egypt is the Leviathan, and how Daniel has all these big scary things and these creatures that always represent somebody oppressing Israel, somebody waiting, the offspring of the original serpent standing at the ready. Here it says Nebuchadnezzar ate us down. Just like the dragon stands at the end in Revelation, waiting to devour the child. John simply takes the theme of evil personified as a monster, something scary, to let you know that evil's not good. That deep down, even though it may look great on the outside, on the inside, it is never there for you. It is always against you. So we'll jump back into Revelation, verse 3, 4, and then 7. So after the woman, another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on its head. And it swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth, so that it might devour her child the moment it was born. Just like the imagery of Nebuchadnezzar and the other kings of old. He jumps out and he says, then a war broke out in heaven. Literally, he's looking to the stars, and he sees the dragon swipe the stars out of the sky, and then he sees literally heaven, as in the heavenly place where God dwells. Not just the sky, but he sees beyond that. He sees the reality of what the real cosmic battle is happening. Then a war broke out in heaven, and Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, and here he tells you exactly who it is. He was hurled down, that ancient serpent, think Genesis 3, called the devil or Satan. Those simply mean slanderer and adversary, who leads the whole world astray, for he was hurled to the earth and his angels with him. What you should begin to see is little bits and pieces of the small story with the magnifying glass. The Magi come after Jesus is born, and they go to Herod and they say, where's the king? We come to worship the king of the Jews. And Herod goes, I'm king of the Jews. And they go, no, not you, the other one. The one that has the star in the sky. And then what does he do? He waits to devour the child of promise. He issues the edict that kills all children 2 years old and under. because he's trying to snuff it out. He is one of the offspring, the agents of evil in the world. But we know that he does not overcome. Like Nebuchadnezzar, like Egypt, like all of those before him. But on the cosmic scale, we get this beautiful, strange, weird imagery, and you can look at that and you can get lost, or you can simply say that the dragon was big and scary and powerful. And that's what he's trying to say. 7 heads, 10 horns, 7 crowns. Literally, John likes the number 7 to say complete. He has complete authority and power. He hasn't been thrown down yet. He's in the sky waiting. Some of this imagery comes from, I didn't put it in here because it'll just take us in a lot of tangents, but if you're taking notes, Daniel 7 and 8. Almost everything is word for word that John writes. The animals and the scary beasts, and they all represent something. Some of them represented the kings of old. Some of them represented Alexander the Great and taking over multiple territories. And here we begin to see that simply there is a dragon and he is awesome. And I don't mean awesome like, oh, that's so awesome. I mean awesome like awe-inspiring. You got nothing left to say. Scary. But we know, despite all of the things that he can do, swiping 1/3 of the stars out of the sky, maybe that just means power. Maybe there's some strange imagery of the angels that it talks about that fights with him. The reality is he's got some sway. He can do some things. But he does not win. Verse 7, 8, and 9 tell you the end of the story. He says, I saw the picture of the woman and the dragon, but then I saw the picture in heaven, the battle that happened, and he did not win. The head was stomped from that fateful day in Genesis that will come. He does not win. Now, if you take all the puzzle pieces from the beginning, moving beyond Revelation story and Isaiah and Jeremiah and Genesis, we get to, so how does this matter for us today? What does this really mean? Okay, there's a big scary dragon, and there's evil in the world, and there's a deceiver and one that slanders and lies. And the reality, I'll tell you the real small part that you got to take home. He will do anything he can to steal the power and peace of Christmas. Anything he can to distract you from what really happened. We think, oh, dear sweet baby Jesus, swaddle that baby woman, golden fleece diapers, all those different funny things. And the reality is, the whole world for all time was changed on a cosmic level that you can't see through a microscope, but you have to step back to see the huge picture. At every twist and turn, he will try to take that away from you. The snake game, that was me playing a little snake game on the Gateway computer. 13 years old, eating it, going around. My dad came up and he rubbed my shoulders and he said, I love you, buddy. Just want to let you know. I did what every high school kid does. Yep, okay. That was it. Walked off. The white coat was my brand new white snowboarding coat because of all the mountainous areas in northwest Iowa where you can go snowboarding. Like, I really needed a snowboarding coat. The paint peeling was the steps that we had painted earlier that fall going outside. The scene was the white farmhouse with the trees that had the crystals still on the branches. The snow as you stepped was the crunch and not the squish. The blue caravel sat just beyond the driveway area. The windows were frosty, foggy. Inside was a man, was my dad, a and that old trusty 410 chopper. The massive chest freezer full of meat was the thing that I threw across the room when I was just a 140-pound little guy. The white phone was the thing I ran inside to try and call, but wouldn't work because I couldn't figure out how to dial all the different things. All of that took place days before Christmas. And now here's the thing is, every single year, I see that scene and not this one. Forever. But I make the choice that that will not win. That will not define me. That will not be the place where I get stuck. I will not let that hold sway over what Christmas is truly about. You see, whether it's the heartache and pain that you have, whether it's the struggle of losing loved ones, this year is going to be hard. My grandparents aren't around. They're gone. December 12th is going to come, and that's my gramps' birthday, and I won't call him. His telephone number's still in there. Pops up on the screen inside my car. I can't delete it. It's another year. And some of you have that. You have pain and struggle that comes year after year. During the greatest time of the year, it also brings out some of the deepest struggle. And I will tell you, that serpent of old, the red dragon in the sky, the personification of evil itself, will always try to come back. Always try to have you focus your attention away from what truly happened. He will try to take the pain that you feel, the struggle that you have, and not let it give birth to hope, but let it give birth to despair. Because when you live in despair, he has you. Or for some of us, maybe it's as simple as convincing you just need more stuff. The next ad that comes out. The practical consumerism that Christmas has become. How many presents and who got what, and is everything fair? Who gets this? How many more dollars do we spend? Maybe if we get a few more small things, it'll even out. All of those things to distract you from the true meaning of Christmas. Or maybe for those of us that have been around for a while, it's the struggle of being a bit too religious. That was what the serpent did in the garden. Did God really say? And what did Eve do? She came to God's defense. She didn't say, yes, he said that. She said, yes, he said that, and she said things he didn't say. You will struggle this Christmas if you're that type with, they didn't sing the right songs. The kids' Christmas pageant thing wasn't really like what I grew up with. Why didn't they play that verse in that one song? How come they did this weird Revelation series instead of Luke? It'll sneak up on you, I guarantee it. And that's what he wants. He wants to do anything he can to steal the peace that Christmas brings, the promise of the child to come. It's that last long glimpse in the deep, dark eyes of the dragon. The endless sorrow that it brings. It's the red, fiery glow that is an unquenchable hate. Or maybe it's the subtle, expansive darkness that leads nowhere but utter despair. It'll be hard, and you'll struggle. And if you don't, the people around you will, because to your left and to your right are people that are hurting, but everybody else is doing well. But that's not the final word. For those living in darkness have seen a great light. And on those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given. And the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, mighty God, everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of his greatness and his government and peace there will be no end. For he will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forevermore. I invite you to stand and sing our closing song. John sees the big dragon and the woman in the sky, God does something to prepare him. So that he wouldn't find that place of despair, he shows him a glimpse of the Holy of Holies, the heavenly throne room. And then I looked, and I heard a voice of many angels, numbering thousands upon thousands, and 10,000 times 10,000. They encircled the throne and the living creatures and the elders, and with a loud voice they sang, "Worthy is the Lamb to receive power and wealth and wisdom and strength and honor and glory forever." Thousands upon 10,000 times 10,000. We win. Amen, y'all. Have a great week. Don't forget to get some snacks in the fellowship hall before we leave.